We are at TEDx Manhattan, changing the way we eat, and I'm here with Lance Price. Thank you so much for being with me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So we're talking today about antibiotics in food, which I think is a topic that creates a lot of confusion for people. You know, should they stay away from it? Is it okay to eat animals that have had antibiotics? How do you sort of quell the fears for people?
Well, I try to direct people towards products that are from animals that are raised without antibiotics, because the problem is what happens is when you raise an animal with antibiotics, you select for drug-resistant bacteria that can then go on to contaminate the meat. And then when we bring those products into our house, we can not only consume those drug-resistant bacteria, but we can also contaminate our kitchen with them. And so even the most careful chef can get them on their hands and contaminate the faucet or contaminate the next meal that they're going to make, or maybe the salad that's eaten raw. And so we really have to be careful about these products.
For some people who maybe don't know what animals have antibiotics in them, what should people be on the lookout for in order to know that there are antibiotics in their food?
Right. So you want to look for the only USDA supported labels if you're just going into a normal grocery store. So you want to look for the labels that say raised without antibiotics or no antibiotics administered ever. Labels like that are supported, but things like antibiotic-free are actually not supported by the USDA. Organic is, obviously, and that's another place where we're not using antibiotics.
So if it's certified organic, there are no antibiotics.
Right, so they shouldn't be using antibiotics in organic products. And so those are the labels you should be looking for. And you should have those conversations with your meat person and with your at your farmer's market, and ask your farmer about what they're doing as well.
And for someone who says, I take antibiotics, I don't care, why should they care?
People should take antibiotics if they have a bacterial infection, right? If the doctor tells them to. You know, we should, but we shouldn't demand them every time we have a cold, because that's going to create drug-resistant bacteria in us too. People who dismiss this, I think, underestimate the power of these little microbes. So it turns out that drug-resistant bacteria kill 23,000 Americans each year, and that number has gone up, right? And the number of bacteria that are becoming resistant to antibiotics is increasing. And so, and we've all had the pleasure of growing up at a time when we have antibiotics that work. But we don't want to live in a world where they don't work.
Exactly. And is there a health concern that the more antibiotics we consume with our meat, that the more resistant we will become to our own antibiotics? Is that a concern?
It's not. So I think there's a lot of confusion, because in the mainstream media they talk about people becoming resistant to antibiotics, but people don't ever become resistant to antibiotics. It turns out that bacteria become resistant, and then we ingest them or we get them into our system, and then those can cause drug-resistant infections. And so it's never the people, it's always the infection that's resistant. And so yeah, the more we use antibiotics ourselves, the more likely that we'll create those. But again, we're using 4 times as many antibiotics in food animal production as we're using in human medicine. And we have 9 billion animals in the United States that we're raising mostly on antibiotics. And so we're just creating massive populations of drug-resistant bacteria there.
Well, thank you so much for clearing up some of these myths that we have about antibiotics in our food. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.